Hi, everyone, and welcome to Media Capital. This is a podcast where consumer investing meets media innovation. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Jenny Wordsworth, founder at Ovum. This is a trusted one-stop shop for all things fertility, offering fertility supplements, products such as biodegradable pregnancy tests, and educational resources to help improve fertility outcomes. Jenny has a fascinating story. She's a lawyer turned sports athlete and founder. And before she started Ovum, she completed a solo and unassisted expedition to the South Pole to become only the 8th woman to make it to the South Pole. She left her career as an M&A lawyer to start Ovum, following her own frustration experiences with the fertility industry. So in this episode, we talk about resilience, Jenny's journey to becoming a mom and building a consumer brand, tackling the global fertility treatment market worth billions of dollars. So if you're as passionate about consumer investing and brand advertising as we are, don't forget to follow the pod, leave a review, and check out more content at mediaforgrowth.com. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I really want to start with your life before the brand. You have a fascinating background and story, and I would love to know what experiences have shaped you as a founder.
I think being an M&A lawyer certainly helped. That's probably the most boring aspect of my background, but it definitely influenced me. I think because as a lawyer in a law firm, you never get the full story behind a business of the client you're supporting on a deal. When I was M&A, so mergers and acquisitions, just more and more was finding I wanted to know, why are you selling the business? And why are you exiting that? Why did you go down that product route? And why did you do this? And you don't get to find that out because you're charging by the minute. I just really want to understand how the business I was working with were doing what they were doing and why. So that definitely influenced my kind of desire to go and do it myself. I think I also learned a lot of people that I really looked up to, companies that we were working with. I thought they must be like these unicorns, just something so special about them. And then you'd meet them, you'd be like, oh, it's just hard work and hard work. So that was always quite interesting to me. Antarctica definitely had a huge impact. That was a world record attempt for the fastest speed crossing of Antarctica, solo and unsupported, like you mentioned. I failed to secure that record not once, but twice. Not really a failure, but officially I didn't achieve the record. And on the second attempt, the first attempt, I was medevaced with a bowel infection. And that was all over the press when I got back. And that was really disheartening. And so I decided to go straight back the next season, do it again. Thank you to my sponsors for supporting me to do that. And that attempt, I was 2 days ahead of the world record, about halfway through, and everyone just really believed I was going to make it this time. And then I had this horrible leg injury and happened, I think, about 90 miles from the pole, split open. It was gnarly. And so I had to just drag my leg the rest of the way. So I didn't get the record, but I did make it to the pole, which actually turned out to be enough for me. But that's had a huge impact on kind of life going forward. As a professional endurance athlete for the North Face, the clothing brand, and so they very kindly would pay me to go and climb mountains, go on expeditions. Obviously, they supported with Antarctica. And I think just all my background in sport has led to this. For me, it's about exploring and learning. It's new opportunities. That's what I love, whether it's in sport and obviously in business. But I think the resilience, the determination, the grit that comes with all those adventures is exactly what you need to found a business. So that was fortunate. And all the qualities that it requires, they're very much mirrored.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you still travel?
I now have a 3.5-year-old and a 7-month-old baby. And I'm trying to figure this out with my husband last night. I think so. I roughly do expeditions now, probably every 18 months to 2 years-ish. So the last one, I just got back a couple of weeks ago from swimming with humpback whales and orcas in Norway. That was a lifelong dream. I always wanted to do that, not an expedition as such, but very fun. And we took time away from the kids to go do that together, which was really fun. Before that was a 3-week mountain bike race in Kyrgyzstan in the mountains. Again, like I know nothing about mountain biking or didn't at the time. So that was the interest in doing that. And then the next thing I'm hoping to do, and maybe I can convince you to join us, is rowing the Pacific. I think it has to be the Pacific. I'd be open to the Atlantic, but I'm looking for 3 women to join on the boat. And yeah, ideally going for a world record attempt for the fastest crossing. That would be amazing.
I think if it was cycling, I think probably I would have
We could
joined
do
you.
cycling. I can find
We can think of a race. I think I love cycling. It must have probably taken you weeks to prepare for that expedition to the South Pole. So doing something like that in the Pacific or Atlantic, I can't possibly imagine how long it would take.
Antarctica was like 2 years of training, physical training and preparation. It was a 900-mile expedition. It was a huge endeavor. And then there's actually the fundraising. I had to fundraise like a couple £100,000 And it's just the same as fundraising for a business. You're just convincing complete strangers to ultimately believe in you and what you're doing and back you all the way. So yeah, lots of similarities.
I'm very curious, before we speak about Ovum, just generally what drives you, because we met in 2024 when we were going through the program and you joined the MFG program. I remember you were 8 months pregnant when this issue officially started. And then you had your baby just before we finished. And we had this big event, and you went on to record a video and do all of this so that you can technically still be part of the event. Well, you just had your baby. I don't think it's something that we honestly see every day. What is it that drives you?
I know what we're building at Ovum is very important to the women and men who are trying to conceive and it's not happening for them. I know we can provide better. And from my own background with infertility, I am extremely protective of anyone who's in this space of trying to bring a baby home. We're vulnerable. And when I was in this space of being infertile and couldn't get pregnant, I felt like the sector completely took advantage of my vulnerability. And I hated that. I actually feel quite disempowered, and I hated the products that were available, the services that were available. Like, me trying to conceive isn't this kind of money-making endeavor. I didn't like the quality of the products, and I felt that turned to anger because I don't like anyone who's vulnerable being preyed upon. So Ovum is very much the antithesis of that. Founded it with 2 IVF doctors who are my closest friends. And it's just a opportunity to do something better and place the woman who's trying to conceive at the core of everything we do.
So essentially your own frustrations basically with the whole industry was what inspired you to start Ovum. How did it start? Because I think you have a very interesting story. I think you started working on this during COVID.
Yeah, so I came back from the second attempt in Antarctica to break the world record, and I convinced my boss to let me do a sabbatical. So I wanted time off to go and do my MBA. And that comes from always being interested in other businesses, but never getting the full background on the business, like I mentioned when you're working as a lawyer. And I convinced them to let me do the MBA. I went to do the MBA, and it was week 1 of the MBA, and it was all cancelled because of COVID. And I decided if I go back to work, I'll just stay there. This is the time to do something. My 2 friends that I mentioned who are IVF doctors, IVF clinics were shut in COVID right at the beginning, and I just quit my job. That needs to be the step that makes everything else happen from that one bold move. And it's exactly what we did.
What do you think, building Ovum and probably speaking to hundreds of women, doing all the trials and working with your team, what do you think are some of the misconceptions or the things that we don't really know about conceiving, or the challenges that we're facing conceiving?
I think because of the lack of education, which hasn't changed since I was at school, is that you might think it's very easy to get pregnant and it's actually on your own timetable. And for me, it was a case of, hey, I've got the career, I'm a lawyer, I've got somewhere to live, so now I have a husband, so now I'm going to have a baby. And I'm not kidding, it's embarrassing to say this, but the first month that I didn't get pregnant, I was genuinely floored. And embarrassingly, it revealed huge gaps in my own knowledge of just very basic things about the female body, such as you're born with all the eggs you'll ever have, your body doesn't make any more. It's like a warehouse of eggs, and they deteriorate over time. It's not like sperm that's constantly regenerating and they can make more, we can't. Just all these things I didn't know, and I actually felt quite angry about that as well. At Ovum, we're about to launch a book for teenage girls going into schools, just to provide some basic education because it's really missing. And I think you just need to grow up with that awareness. Other very popular misconceptions are that this is like a female problem. So people who are trying to conceive in heterosexual relationships, it's just the woman. We don't need to look at sperm health, and that's just completely incorrect. So a lot of the blame goes on the woman. It also remains a very taboo subject. So we are now listed in several of the major retailers, and it's always interesting to me how difficult it is to work with their marketing teams to appear in a magazine, the grocery magazine, the retailer's magazine, because they're still very worried about talking about even pregnancy tests, just anything to do with infertility. That still does surprise me. We have to find ways of breaking down those taboos and finding other ways to work with people so that they can slowly but surely get on board that this affects 1 in 6 heterosexual couples. The rate of infertility is getting worse. It's declining globally. So this isn't a problem that people aren't experiencing. There's just certain gatekeepers who are preventing us from talking about it more openly.
I just want to talk a bit about the product lines and the supplements, not just a biodegradable test, which is the first one, I think, in the UK to be 100% biodegradable. But let's talk a bit about the supplements and how you're supporting that woman's journey before, during, and after.
Our flagship product is our Time to Conceive. It's patented. It's got 3 human clinical studies behind it. And it's the first supplement brand in the UK where we've been able to work with IVF clinics. So our product is now recommended in 1 in 5 IVF clinics in the UK, and that number is growing every month. And we're listed on the patient protocol. So when you go in and you're starting IVF treatment, it will say for the first couple of months, we'd like you to take Ovum. And that really was the foundation for the business. So I spent a lot of time building that network with our IVF doctors. It's hugely important. It's what gave us all the organic growth that we experienced and still experience, because the word of mouth amongst people who are trying to conceive, if your doctor has recommended your product, you just can't put a value on that. It takes time. So we now have absolutely the respect and the credibility from the medical community, and that's something that's very sacred at Ovum. So we never want to lose that. We just go into clinics, we talk to them. There's education. It's now turned into an annual CPD verified course because we review all the latest scientific evidence annually. And if there's a certain level of evidence behind a nutrient that would warrant updating our formulation or changing it, then we do. So you always know you're providing the best, because my frustration when looking into this market was a lot of other products out there. Let's say, for example, there was a randomized controlled trial, which is like the gold standard in evidence. And that suggested that to improve egg quality, CoQ10, for example, has great evidence behind it. So CoQ10 for your egg quality, and that scientific evidence would say you want to be on a dose of 600 milligrams a day for at least 8 weeks. So that's how we know you can get that outcome. And what I find with other products is they would quote that study, but their own actual product had 20 milligrams of CoQ10 in a daily dose. And that offends me. That's basically, I might as well just consume dust. It's not having the impact that you've led me to believe it would based on you quoting that study at me. And I just don't have time for that. And neither does the woman who's trying to conceive. Respect their time, respect the physical, mental, emotional toil of trying to conceive and provide better products. And that's really what Ovum is. So that was our first one. And then after that, we launched the first fully recyclable pregnancy test. And that was definitely built from the ground up to sit into brick and mortar retail. So that's now in roughly 600 Sainsbury's stores. And then we launch a major retailer. Actually, that goes live on Sunday. That's very exciting. But we haven't announced that externally yet, so I won't tell you who it is.
Congrats. And it's also FDA approved, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, both products are in preparation for a US launch.
Awesome. We'll come back to your learnings of building Ovum, what worked in the early beginning, what perhaps didn't. But we have this segment in the episode called a shout out, which essentially gives you the opportunity to mention somebody that had an impact on you or the business. Is there anyone that you could think of?
Yes. And I love this question in a podcast because I've never been asked this, and it's way more fun to talk about other people. It was so easy for me to think about this. So the first one is Gail Armstrong. She's the founder and partner at Lavender VC. She invested in Ovum very early on off the back of one phone call with me, and she's incredible. She's very well connected. She's always making helpful introductions. She always checks in. There's anything I can help with, and she's brilliant. She's a huge supporter of femtech in the entire sector. Like, I think a lot of people know her, have heard of her. And I often say I'd love to have 100 Gales on my cap table. She's brilliant. And then another individual is a gentleman called Dan Boyer. He's a partner and founder at Superseed VC. He is an outstanding individual. And if you ever get the chance to go to an event that he's speaking at, or you get the chance to work with him, just do it. He's extremely generous with his time. I also find him very funny, but he'll help any founder. He's just great. He helped me prepare for a raise, and he's just brilliant. And I can pick up the phone to him anytime. But yes, I would say if he's at an event, presenting at an event, go to that event. You won't regret it.
If Dan gets inundated with a lot of LinkedIn messages from founders after this podcast, then he knows what to say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You mentioned basically two incredible people, both from the VC landscape. How was it like? You just disclosed around last year. You're preparing for a new one. How do you find fundraising these days?
I find that the best way is to consider it as a game and to get in that headspace. It's like speed dating. You might never know why someone ghosted you or why they didn't want to go on a second date, and you just have to try and live with that. I do enjoy it once I get going. You need a lot of energy. So I would say you need to be able to leave your business basically to run as much by itself as it can. So great team in place, but also set up your life so that you can do this. So everyone needs to know this is what's going on. I do enjoy it. I'm about to do it again. The last fundraise with Morgan Stanley as lead, I don't think people would believe how that went down. I had to go to investment committee with them when my little boy was 3 days old, and I will never forget that experience. It was incredibly emotional, and my husband was like, I'm leaving the house with him. You've got this. You've got this. And even though I'd only given birth a couple of days ago and I was working right up in the hospital, I feel like I didn't know my financial model all of a sudden. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I was just like, I'm just going to do this. And if I flunk it, I'm okay with that because there's nothing I can do about my life situation, right? They'd already delayed for me and all this stuff. So they accommodated a lot. And it was wild. And then for the actual close, so once the funds came in, I did that in a Costa Coffee in a Shell garage in Putney, where the staff got to know me very well. And the reason I was there is it's the nearest place to my house that had Wi-Fi that I could just sit and work, and I was breastfeeding, and so baby had to be at home, but I couldn't be in the house because if he hears you, just gets upset. And also it was sending milk back and all these things. So my mum was like constantly going back and forth between the house and the garage to collect milk for me. It was wild. Now I'm about to go for this second raise now. It kicks off next week and I'm just getting into the headspace for it. And it should be more straightforward this time, I hope. We're fundraising a higher amount. So the fundraise is for 1.8 million. But yeah, I'm excited. I think Ovum is doing incredibly well. The story is a great one. And a lot of investors are very on board with it. I've never had an investor turn me down, which is always nice. Yeah, it's a big job. I don't think I knew when I was starting to be a founder that actually your job is perpetual fundraising.
It's everything, isn't it, in the beginning? You have to do everything. And I think what a lot of people probably don't know is that you actually left quite a bit of money on the table during your previous round. So that's actually a nice position to be in.
Yeah, and that was down to having a tiny baby. I just was like, I'm going to implode if I keep trying to raise and doing this. And like my husband was posted away with work for 3 months and it was just everything at once. Yes, it is nice to know that hopefully that money's still on the table if I go back.
Jenny, what would be one lesson that you wish you knew when you started Ovum? You looked at a lot of businesses when you were a lawyer and now you built your own brand. What changed or what do you think that was that one crucial lesson coming out of this?
I've reflected on this quite a lot and I think it's speed of execution. So I know I've got all these adventurous and crazy stories, mountaineering, etc. But I'm actually quite cautious person. So with risk, I think I do a lot of calculations before I take on any kind of chunky risk. In the early days of Ovum, I felt like I'd seen brands around me raise squillions at ridiculous valuations. Oh, we think we've got product market fit, there's some initial traction, blow it all on marketing. And ultimately, I've seen them go bust. Or I've seen they hired 50 people and they've had to get rid. And that made me incredibly cautious. So for me, it was about going slowly. It was about building solid foundations, limiting spend. I think investors are always quite impressed with that. What can you achieve with not much money? But looking back, I think we probably should have experimented a bit more. I should have loosened the purse strings just a little bit. And I think it was the right approach in the early days. So I don't totally regret it. But I think it's me now trying to get out of that headspace of being that kind of founder. That's harder for me to do, but that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. So I think companies that can execute quickly will always do well, I think.
You mentioned being calculated. I think that's actually a trait that I've seen a lot of female founders. And somebody can argue that we're more risk adverse than maybe other founders. I actually completely share that and I completely empathize with what you said. I run the business the same way. So I don't know if it's necessarily being risk adverse or rather just being sane. And being very careful with your money.
When I one day have exited Ovum and I set up my female-focused VC investment firm, I think all my money would go into female-founded brands. I think it's the safest place to put your investor money.
In terms of growth, you mentioned growth and marketing as well. There's a lot that's probably about to change with this upcoming round in terms of how you market Ovum. What was the kind of the growth strategy in the early beginning? How did you actually get to grow the brand and get people to know about it?
It was all about building credibility with the medical community. That is what I wanted to do. And that is what we spent 18 months, 2 years, it's ongoing now doing. If you have them on board, and I think a lot of brands, healthcare brands, fail to build with the medical community. I think that's a mistake. So build with them, get their insights, work with them. Because the organic growth that we got from that, I just can't even tell you. It's been everything. Because if your doctor recommends a product to you independently, because they want to, they've reviewed the safety data behind it, they've reviewed the studies behind it, they've met the company, you can't pay for that in any kind of marketing. So that took up a lot of time. But I love organic growth. As you notice, I don't like spending money.
Spending money carefully and in a calculated way.
But to build longevity in a brand, that to me was just what I'm doing. Like I want Ovum to become like a household name. At that, I felt very strong that that's where we had to start.
I suppose actually your community, in a way, it's your virality factor. I've seen a lot of the stories share on Instagram and women sharing their own experiences. And Ovum is not just available with an IVF clinic and retail shops, but you can also order directly from your website. So it's essentially home self-care, if you like. How do you think, or how do you envision that changing in the next round?
I think we'll have even more of a focus on D2C. We haven't even touched the sides of what we could do, especially with like growth marketing. So the paid ad sides of things, there's so much we can do there. There's only upside in the business as far as I'm concerned. For brick and mortar retail, we will have more listings for the products in brick and mortar retail. But there comes a point where you stop that. It's amazing for brand awareness and brand build, but the margins are horrible. So in terms of the next raise, yeah, continued focus on D2C. There's a lot more B2B coming through. So we're seeing a lot of employers in the UK now looking to offer fertility benefits, and they're actively reaching out to us to offer our products to their employees, which is great to see. Yeah, and there's also a lot around maximizing scientific evidence, so more trials. We'll be able to fund those, and just a lot more partnerships with kind of universities and organizations. We're also funding a couple of PhDs at the moment as well. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Just going back to the FDA approval in the US, where is the US in your roadmap?
I've seen a lot of brands launch over in the US, and I've just been watching and learning. I spent several years recently living over there, and I think the biggest mistake is to try and treat it like a bigger version of the UK. It's just not. It's so vast and distribution is so different. So I was very cautious about the US. Investors ask about it a lot. There's still so much to do in Europe, which is right there. But in terms of the US, we were very fortunate to receive a grant from the Department of Trade, who identified 15 of the most innovative femtech startups in the UK, gave us support, a bit of money to look at what a launch in the US might look like. So we will go for like a pilot scheme over there, because why wouldn't you? We'll take it from there, probably like a test bed state, if you like, or like LA, New York, potentially Ohio, and just see how it goes up there. We get a huge amount of inbound requests to launch in America. So yeah, it is of interest. I'm not sure it's the first country you should go to for the stage that we're at. I think that's probably lower hanging fruit than trying to tackle the beast that is the US. But yeah, it's definitely an area of interest.
Jenny, we have a quick fire round of questions that I would like to go through with you. These are supposed to be quite short and sweet, as we call them. Here comes the first one. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Keep doing what you're doing. You're fine. You'll make mistakes. You'll figure it out. And it's all helping build you, your values, your character, which leads you on to Ovum. So don't worry, just keep trucking.
I like to say that if I was to change anything, I would change nothing. There's a lot of consumer founders or founders in general actually listening to this episode. What piece of advice would you give to them as they grow their business?
Do as much as you can for the least amount of spend. Come at a problem with a different way, a different approach. Like necessity is the mother of all invention, and it does impress investors. You've got the time at that stage, you've got the determination, and that will get you quite far. You don't always just need money. A lot of people think they have product market fit and they do not. And I've seen brands think that they have and then blow money. So I think wait until you actually have that. Otherwise it will be your undoing.
And I do have to ask, because you're building this business, you're a mother of two, you're also keeping yourself active and planning new expeditions. How do you juggle all of this? How do you do all of this at once?
The same as any other busy person on the planet. I think you do the things you want to do. So if I didn't want to do children, if I didn't want to do expeditions, if I didn't want to do Ovum, then I wouldn't. And so because you do, you have to find a way to make it work. Being completely honest, I have an incredibly supportive husband who also has a very busy career. And you just have to, it's just teamwork. For us, it's putting each other first to make sure the other's okay. Trying to be organized. Some months we're like, we nailed it this month. And then the next month we're like, oh gosh, this was terrible. And no one's got it figured out. You're just doing the best you can and trying to learn all the time and improve. I think for me, I have a network of female founders and I completely adore them. And it's really helpful to have people who are in the same boat. But yeah, it's definitely tricky. I didn't take any maternity leave as such. And other people think that's completely mad when they're an employee of a business. Why did you not take maternity leave? It's definitely difficult, but you're obviously doing it because you want to. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing it. I'm completely obsessed with Ovum. I wake up every single day like so excited to open my laptop, and it's all I ever want to do. I get a bit sad when it's Friday afternoon, actually. It's just a bit sad, really. Yeah, it's everything to me and I love it.
I'm honestly really glad that you're just fully transparent about this, because I generally feel the same. And sometimes you feel like there's something wrong just because you approach the weekend and everyone should just have a fantastic time and look forward to it. And I feel like it's just so quiet. And you're like, the weekend is it's almost like the worst time in the week in a way. When you build something that you're passionate about, I think there's that cliche thing where you just don't feel like you're actually working. It's hard. It's really hard. But yeah, you're doing it because you're passionate about it, which brings me to the last question. What excites you most about this space?
What excites me is also what makes it a little depressing. It's been stagnant for so long. Legacy brands, they still take center stage. They're not serving their consumers. They're outright ignoring them. The Try and Conceive community wrote an open letter to one of our biggest competitors just before we launched, saying, hey, we're over here, like you keep ignoring us. So I think the opportunity for a brand that's doing things differently is significant. And that also applies to fertility treatments as well. So success rates in IVF in the UK have been stagnant for well over a decade, and there's just no reason they should be. It's not good enough. we should and we can provide better reproductive healthcare. And I think I love being a little part of the solution that can drive us towards that.
Awesome. That's actually a very nice way of wrapping up this episode.
I
And
see.
I no doubt you will absolutely smash the next fundraise. You'll do great. But best of luck with
Thank
that. And
you.
thank you so much, Jenny, for just having a really nice conversation. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for your time.
And thank you for joining us on Media Capital. And if you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, follow the pod, and subscribe at mediaforgrowth.co. Thank you.
Join us in New York City on February 20th at 200 Park Avenue for the MFG Consumer Investors Breakfast. This invite-only roundtable event kicks off an exclusive series taking place in New York City and London, designed to connect top investors and family offices to discuss the latest innovations in the consumer space. Don't miss your chance to be part of groundbreaking conversations in the media and investment landscape. Drop us an email at contact@mediaforgrowth.co if you're interested in learning more.